Morning, everyone. I'm an alcoholic. I'm a member of a Big Book Step Study group. We meet Saturday mornings. It's called Norton Original Recipe. My name's Jeff Bumpus. God, I get to qualify. I can tell you, I was born the youngest of three kids. I was born, I had a middle brother and an older sister. We're born 2 calendar years apart each. My sister went on and graduated in 1980. My brother graduated in 82, and I graduated in 85. I never stayed back. My mother held me back from starting a school curriculum in kindergarten because she thought I was too immature to enroll in school. How mature do you have to be to go to a half-day session where you finger paint and take naps? Right? I'm the only alcoholic in my home. There's none in that branch of the family with my mother and father, who are both the youngest of 5 kids, and my brother and sister are not. She saw something different in me. She saw my soul sickness, but she didn't understand it was alcoholism, and that when I was going to put alcohol in me, I was going to become an alcoholic. She did what she was supposed to do, and she cared for me the best she could, and she loved me and tried to sit there and be there for me and do what she thought was right to help me. And she did a great job. She kept me alive long enough that I could sit there and discover alcohol, and alcohol kept me alive long enough that I could find you good people. That's the truth of the matter. For the first 16 years of my life, I hadn't discovered alcohol other than a rare occasion on a Sunday night when me and my brother Howie were coming of age, and Dad wanted to teach us the effects of alcohol in a controlled environment. He was afraid that maybe we'd go out and experiment. What I remembered from that experience was it was the only time I felt like an equal. I always felt like I grew up in the shadow of my brother. My brother is a carbon footprint copy of my dad. I always had that animosity towards that because even my hair parts on the wrong side from Dad and Howie, and there were a lot more examples, but I just always felt different, felt separate from, and this was a case where we were all equal. We'd had a 7-ounce Miller High Life, a pony, over pizza on a Sunday night twice. But when I turned 16 and all these other measures were somewhat working, like coming home and raiding the cabinets or vegetating in front of the boob tube, watching these half-hour sitcoms where there was always some little goofball incident that would happen, but at the end of it, they got through it and they learned a lesson, where I could sit there and vicariously live my life to them and say it's just going to take a little longer for me, but things will be okay someday. When the thought that the new game, the new bike, the new toy, the new handheld thing I could play with, everything I kept believing was going to help me to be okay, when those were in the back of the closet or broken or long forgotten, I was still left with the notion that I wasn't okay. And there was a couple of things that were going on there. One, it was always delayed gratification. I was never okay in the moment. I was going to be okay if this happened. And then the other side of that coin is the worst part, is that when I got it, I felt better. And so I started to believe the delusion that my mind tells me, the lies that it tells me, and that I'd be okay, as long as I could just sit there and figure out what to do next. And so with that in mind, what ended up happening was, along the way, the next thing happened after the bicycle, and I'm watching my brother and sister that are older than me, so I know what to do. I can try and follow in their footsteps, and they got these licenses and cars, and they were able to sit there, and it looked like the real freedom. It looked like true freedom for me. And I ended up following along that path, and I got a car, and with it came an after-school job so I could earn some money and keep it on the road, and maintenance and insurance, and I needed the insurance. Trust me, as it turned out. I drank a lot. And one day at this friendly restaurant, after work, Scott said, "Hey, we're hanging out in the back parking lot if you want to stick around." I cannot remember. It's been a long time. I cannot remember if he ever said we're going to be drinking tonight. But here I am feeling separate from, and now I'm being asked to be a part of. And I grew up going to a regional high school, and this was just outside of those boundaries, where I was looking at a bunch of new guys. They went to a different school, and Scott and Brian and Eric and I were in the back parking lot drinking, and alcohol affected me the way it's supposed to. It's a disinhibitor. It removed the fear, and it made me feel comfortable in my own skin for maybe the first time ever. And nothing really bad happened that night, so when I wake up in the morning, why wouldn't I sit there and think to myself, I'm going to do this as often as I possibly can? Now, for me, that meant I drank another 16 years of my life. I got sober when I was 32 years old. But along the way, what alcohol did to me I lost time at 3 separate jobs. I lost 2 jobs as a direct result of drinking. I lost friendships. I lost relationships as a direct result of drinking. I've been in over 3 dozen accidents. I've totaled 5 cars as a direct result of drinking. At the age of 23, I was arrested, charged, and convicted with a first offense OUI. I had a bunch of PCs in between that. A bunch of times I got pulled over and field sobriety tested. At the age of 31, I was arrested and charged with a second offense OUI. And I got a high-priced lawyer. He helped get me off on that charge. At the age of 32, I was arrested, charged, convicted of my second offense on a second offense charge. And in between that, there was a lot of get-out-of-jail-free cards. I didn't realize that was called enabling, but my uncle retired from the state police force as personal bodyguard to the governor and went on to be the chief of police in the town I grew up in. When he retired, he gave it over to his son. My cousin became chief of police. My father worked for the State Department, so if they were paving a road through your town, he knew every single cop from detail work. And I got off a lot of times in between that I can't even tell you about right here. But at the age of 32, alcohol stopped working for me. And that's all that alcohol did to me, in a nutshell. But as long as what alcohol did for me was make me comfortable in my own skin, I was willing to pay that price for a long, long time. So then we sit there and we get to this point where I'm court-ordered to come to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm not even sure if I'm alcoholic. I just think I get into trouble because I hear definitions like insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. I went from drinking whenever I could to drinking every weekend, being that weekend warrior, to the weekends getting longer and longer. At the end, it was 5 nights a week minimum, unless there were special occasions like a vacation or something going on where you get to drink other than that. And 250 times a year minimum, I'm in the same bar drinking every single night. And once in a while, once in a year, once every 2 years, I get pulled over or I'll have a car crash. And I didn't understand the definition of insanity because I didn't see it fully. And the truer definition I know today is insanity is the inability to see the truth. The truth was that I could have gotten pulled over any one of those days, and it was just a simple roll of the dice that I never did, and that I put myself at risk for any of those things happening to me every single time I got behind the wheel, because I always drank for oblivion. Coming to realize that I am an alcoholic and that I am powerless over alcohol, sitting in these meetings, I heard everybody, whether it was this big book step study format meeting or beginners meeting, which occurred here before the meeting you should probably attend if you're new. No matter what the format of the meeting was, I heard all these people. I identified, I heard my complete story collectively through every one of you that shared. And as a result, I admitted to myself, like a movie ticket, let in. I admitted into myself the idea and concept that I was alcoholic. And what did that mean? It meant I'm powerless over the choice of alcohol. It means that I didn't change my mind and go out that night and drink when I said I wouldn't. It didn't mean I changed my mind and said I'm going to stay and have another one or close a place when I said I was going to leave after the third or fourth or at 10 o'clock. That I was succumbing to a mental obsession and a physical compulsion. So if alcohol has more power than me, I need to find a power greater than that. I already know there are powers out there because alcohol has more power than me. And all of you collectively said that you found a power greater than yourself that you could believe in, that worked for you, and you asked that source to help you stay sober a day at a time. And so I started to do that. Remember the first time I did that, I was in a 2-week treatment program for the second offenders, and I waited for the kid in the bottom bunk to fall asleep. I could hear him snoring, and then I rose up and got on my knees in the top bunk because I was embarrassed to let someone think that I was going to sit there and ask someone outside myself to help me with this. Everything I'd ever done failed, but the fact that I would sit there and seek help. And then the next morning I got on my knees, still in bed, and asked for a day of sobriety. And I continued to do that forever. But clearly, to get into the reading here, when we're on page 51 in today's reading in the chapter We Agnostics, it says, leave aside the drink question and tell why living is so unsatisfactory. And then it sits there and goes on page 52, and we read what we have called the bedevilments. We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view. What point of view? The point of view that I need help from a power greater than myself to help me with my drinking. But I might need to now start looking to see if I need help from a higher power to help me with all these other problems. And what are they? We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were a prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Yes. Collectively, yes. That's me. Before I ever picked up a drink, in a nutshell, that was definitely me while I was drinking, because I always overshot the mark, and that is definitely me in sobriety. Remember now, for 16 years until I turned 32, alcohol was not a problem. It caused a couple problems, but it was a solution to my life. To what? What do you mean? Well, it's a solution to all these other things we just read, these things that in the book are called bedevilments. The chapter we're reading is called We Agnostics. The word agnostic, it broken down, Gnostic means knowledge, and ag, the prefix, means without. I'm without knowledge. First off, I was without knowledge that there was a God out there who was willing to help me. Right? But then I gained the knowledge from listening to all you good men and women share, and you tell me that God will help me stop drinking a day at a time. And I gained the knowledge through your experience. I haven't yet to gain the knowledge. I was beaten into a state of reasonableness by alcohol, the great persuader. And I realize I need help from a source greater than myself to keep me sober. But life ain't that bad. I'm living in a crummy apartment. I'm driving a car I don't really like. I've got an hourly job that I drank myself into such a hole that I picked up a part-time job to go along with it. Strained relationships with family. I'm allowed over there on holidays and birthdays, but I don't realize they get together for barbecues and spaghetti dinners just to catch up. Financial woes, distress. $7,000 in the hole to financial institutions. $5,000 to the family because they've been helping me get the lawyers to try and ease me because they're still in my life and they want the best for their son still. Life's not good, and I'm still willing to pay the price because they're still around, and there's still things I haven't lost completely. And to gain the knowledge that we agnostics shares is that I can become Gnostic. I can gain knowledge that I can sit there and turn to a power greater than myself, and that power greater than me can help me in these other areas of my life if I'm willing to surrender it. Right? I mean, this is a second step reading, but we're getting along in here, right? In Bill's story, it sits there on page 14. It says, "For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead." It used to confuse me. How do you get something perfect and then enlarge upon it? Right? Today I see it like a Trivial Pursuit game piece, and I don't know if everyone out here knows what that is, but it's a game, board game, and the piece I walk around with is it looks like a empty pie with divisions in it that I can put pieces of pie in to try and fill it up. If you fill it up first, you win. But I'm going around this game of life, and all of a sudden I don't know it. I'm just completely empty. I'm a vacuum. And all of a sudden I realize that I need help from God in my life to keep me sober, and I filled that one pie piece. That's perfect. My state of spiritual perfection is the God of my understanding, and when I let that into my life, it's perfect. But the rest of my life, my financial life, my vocational life, my love life, my family life, every other aspect of life, fill in the blank, is still empty. So I can still enlarge upon that. It's this crazy thought, and this young girl helped point that out to me. Really, on page 59, the short form of the steps, so I guess they're hanging right behind me on one side or the other. In step 3, it says, I make a decision to turn my will and my lives, plural. Check it out. It says, our will, our lives. I have a singular will. This is the harmony of the founders who were around, all of them, not just the two we talk about, who sat there and helped write this book. They said, collectively, I turn my will and my lives, plural. I've already surrendered my drinking life, and I'm sober. I've invited the God of my understanding into my life, and I've never asked him to leave, and so I've been perfectly sober since April 10th, 1999. I have not been perfectly happy. For a long time, I settled for relief instead of recovery, and all I was sober. I hadn't done any of this other work, and I'll tell you, I've heard it around here, and it's a one-off comment that sits there and says the leading cause of relapse is sobriety. But that's really the truth. That's really, really, really the truth, is when we sit there and we get to a point where I can't stand my miserable life drinking, I'll get sober, and then if I can't stand my miserable life sober, I know what to do to find relief. But when I come in here uneducated, then the only thing I know that's going to help me find relief is in a bottle. But to come around here and hear these stories, hear this experience, strength, and hope from all of you, I was able to sit there and determine that I can find relief from life on life's terms if I can just sit there and surrender my will, my ego, that lower mind, over to the care of a power greater than myself in any other aspect of my life. The reality is after we go a little further in the work, and I hate to do this, I'm talking about chapter we agnostics in step 2, and I've already gone into Bill's story, and I've already gone into next week's readings and everything, but all these things are entwined, and you have to get to realize that in a moment, right? We have the bedevilments on page 52, and on page 83, just 31 pages later, are the promises that we find in the 9th step. I don't know how, sometimes they read the promises in a meeting, at the beginning of a meeting, and they don't tell you they're the 9th step promises. I don't know if everybody here has heard them before. I guess you have. But I'm going to try and match up the reading from the bedevilments in page 52 of My Life's Unmanageable to the promises in page 83. So it says, we were having trouble with personal relationships. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. We were a prey to misery and depression. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. We couldn't make a living. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We had a feeling of uselessness. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We were full of fear. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We were unhappy. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. No matter how far down the scale we've gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. And most of all, we will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. So, I mean, if you want to move out of your present state unrecovered with just relief, sitting here thinking that it's all about not drinking, I've been there, I can identify with you, I know where you're coming from, but it's not enough. It's the ante into the game. And if you want to sit there and live a more joyful, free, full life, there's work to be done. And it's only 30 pages of instructions in between. Can you give it 30 pages? Can you sit there and just take a chance and sit there and say, what I'm doing isn't working, while I'm sitting here sober, contemplating how long can I hold my breath until I have to go out there and pick up another drink or do something else and put it in me in order to try and find relief? Can you just sit there and find someone who's done this before you, who sits there and says, I know the answer, and trust them just a little bit? You don't have to tell them your whole life story today. Give them a little bit and see if it comes back around to you, and then you'll realize that, when they held on to it, that you can really trust them, and then the true healing will begin. What I can tell you is that the more I've been able to sit there and surrender and stop being a bare minimum kind of a guy, the more my life has been enriched, and I've grown, and I've gotten more healthy spiritually, mentally, physically. It is the next promise that I love. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. It's my favorite. But there's more to it. Faith without works is dead, but that means faith with works is alive. And I hope you want to come alive and stay with us and walk this path. Thanks for letting me share today.